Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Taylor Lectures at Yale Divinity School. I'm Jennifer Hurt, the Stark Professor of Christian Ethics. Today, it is my honor to introduce Professor Graham Ward, who is truly one of the most generative and wide-ranging theological voices of our day, to deliver the second of his three Taylor Lectures on the subject of elemental beauty, spiritual formation. Graham Ward is Regius Professor of Divinity at the University of Oxford, where he has been since 2012. He's also Professor Extraordinarius at the University of Stellenbosch in South Africa. Well known for his association with the radical orthodoxy movement, and more generally with postmodern theology, Ward has made field-defining contributions, not just in the areas of theology and language, culture, and gender, but also on the relationship of religion to politics, sociology, anthropology, neuroscience, and more. For instance, in Cities of God, Ward focused his theological attention on the postmodern city, drawing Augustine and Gregory of Nyssa into conversation with contemporary architecture and film. More recently, in Unbelievable, Why We Believe and Why We Don't, Ward dives into the biology as well as the poetics of believing, arguing that we are made to believe and that secularity, too, is a form of faith. Currently, he's involved in a project on spiritual understanding in a secular age, engaging art as religious ritual, a project with the Australian Catholic University, and much of his work engages art and aesthetics. He's also in the midst of completing a multi-volume work of culturally engaged systematic theology. In How the Light Gets In, Ethical Life 1, Ward outlines a methodology for systematic theology through the lens of lived faith, faith that is culturally, socially, and somatically embodied. In Ethical Life 2, titled Another Kind of Normal, which is due out this March, Ward proposes Christ as riddle, scandal, and paradox, exploring the relationship between divine and human creativity, and between divine rhythm and the rhythms of creation. If you were able to hear Graham Ward's first Taylor lecture on creation, creativity, and grace, you came away with a rich sense for that project as Ward approached the relation between divine and created creativity through artistic performances of filmmaker Terrence Malick and novelist Marilynne Robinson, offering an account at one and the same time of our formation as planetary material creatures and of aesthetic formation as a response to grace given in and through material orders. In today's lecture, titled simply Rock, he promises a continued exploration of our formation as creatures dependent on material elements, and in particular here on rock. I am sure that we are in for an absolute treat, and I only wish that we could be welcoming Professor Ward in person to the Yale Divinity School campus.
Let me begin by thanking Jennifer for that really kind introduction to this second lecture in the Taylor series. Scripture bears witness. The New Testament bears witness to the Christ event. The writers of the Gospels story that event in ways which minimize detail, streamlining for dramatic plotting effect. So they don't go in for the realism of Zola, and that was neither a form nor a perspective available to them. In the account of the birth of Jesus, neither Matthew nor Luke evade the violence the incarnation brings. Matthew has his slaughter of the innocents. Luke's language of angelic interruption may announce good news, but Mary's fear is not played down. The Christmas story is not then all tinsel and coloured lights. Even so, neither write about the blood, water, and mucus of the birthing itself. And yet, in his very divinity, Jesus, as fully God and fully man, means his birth, like the birth of any child, must have involved the pain and the sweating of any parturition. The most graphic gospel material appears in a parable in Mark about defecating in the open sewers, 7:19, and the blood and water that flows from the side of Christ in John 19:34, when pierced with a Roman lance. If incarnation is to have any roots in the earth, and Christ to fully assume that which he created, then materiality cannot be erased. Creation speaks of its ownership and shaping by the Godhead. As Jesus tells some Pharisees who were in the crowd when he entered Jerusalem on the back of a donkey and who upbraided him for incitement, I tell you, if these should hold their peace, the stones would immediately cry out. Luke 19:40. And who can judge the verse in Psalm 114:4 is only trading in metaphors when it tells us the mountains skipped like rams and the little hills like lambs. It's about rock that I want to speak this evening in developing an account of our formation as planetary creatures, formed in and through the materiality of the elements. It's around the theme of rocks that I want to explore the relationship between creation and human creativity. What forms within us by our exposure to rock? What sensibilities, dispositions, and realizations? What communication is there between ourselves and rock? And what kind of communication is it? I collect rocks. I've collected them since I was a boy, pocketing them on walks, lumps of serpentine, rounded granite, moss agates, quartz that the sea has worn translucent, silicates that in the sunlight are silvered or bronze depending upon the rock's iron content or the peaty rainwater. I have hidden them, sculptured them, planted them in gardens like secret prayers or talismans, or placed them on shelves where other people create family shrines of photographs. I intuitively understand the erection of standing stones, monoliths, megaliths, steles, not as artifacts, but as acts, as if the magnetic force of the minerals within them impacted subconsciously. The hardness and heaviness of stone attracts me. The silent containment of stone attracts me. I don't know what they mean, but they somehow have meaning. They defy our interpretations. I don't know what they signify to me, but I echo in a friend who I took to a secluded bay on the southern tip of Iona. When he saw the masses of smooth pebbles forming the shingle beach, he cried, "I want to take them all home." Yes, we want to give them accommodation within us. Beauty is not the right word to describe them. Age makes them venerable, and the time each pebble took to be rolled by the ocean into polished, irregular forms is imponderable. But they presence that immemorial time with solid persistence. I have a piece of serpentine above the sink in my kitchen. It's 3.7 billion years old and veined like human flesh, fossilized. Yet flesh of animal or fish or bird evolved aeons into the future. So my rock models muscular life prophetically. Beauty cannot capture stone's mystery, its endurance. Rock is simply there. When I drive through the mountains, down between their flanks and along their cliff faces, I pay my respects. They give me passage from one zone to another with an indifference that makes my respect even more profound. On a good day, you can climb these mountains and see as their peaks see. Climbing them is an act of presumption. To speak of conquest, to assume something of their sovereignty. I have been caught on too many summits by a snowstorm, a gale, or drenching rain, not to realize their massive otherness and their all too real threat. The window of possibility for climbing some mountains like K2 is very small, and fortune or fate attends the climber who ascends, the air getting thinner, the temperature plummeting. There are balances of prospect, micro and macro, holding the relationships between species, land, water, air, and fire together. Ascending the Gliders and Tryfan in Snowdonia, two of us were forced to pitch camp in a sudden blizzard that wiped out any points to take a compass bearing. We remained there all night and woke to a whitened world. Taking a group up Goats Fell on the Isle of Arran, we were hit between two of its three peaks by a forceful gale coming up from the Irish Sea. The only way down was to cross the thin Stackach Ridge between the peaks, with sheer corrie wall drops on either side. The fear was paralyzing, and though it was summer, the light was beginning to fail. We crossed on our hands and knees, inch by inch, as low to the ground as possible and head to bum. It took fierce acts of will to overcome panic, vertigo, and fear. Death was a clear possibility. On several other ascents, I have retreated, beaten and humbled. Mountains are stern stuff. They permit transgression, sometimes. They attract or conjure legend. Mountains are the abode of the gods, Olympus, sites of divine visitation, Sinai and Tabor, habitations of holiness, Fuji and Uluru, places of prayer, Hukusan and Haguru, and now spirit shrines in interactive video games. Mountains are magnets for the sacred, and the sacred gathers words and images and stories like so many clouds amassing on their summit. Tryfan is supposed to be the place where King Arthur fought his fatal battle with Mordred and was wounded. It's supposed to be the resting place of Sir Bedivere, who took Arthur's sword Excalibur and threw it into the lake Llyn Ogwen. Goat Fell was once owned by the King of Norway and submitted to Norse rule. In Norse mythology, Hrungnir is a rock god, or Jotun, a giant slain by Thor's mighty hammer, Mjolnir. Mjolnir is no stone axe, and this is no ordinary jewel. Mjolnir is more like a thunderbolt. It's a weapon of the air, and Thor's realm is the air. Hrungnir's weapon is his whetstone. The cosmos is at stake in this fight, both its origins and its destruction. As Thor travels to the home of the rock gods, in John Lindau's translation, all the holy places of mounds were able to burn, and the earth was pushed aside with hail for the kinsmen of Ullr. the elements themselves do battle. And while Hrungnir is defeated, his head smashed to pieces, Thor is pinned to the ground by Hrungnir's leg, and a piece of Hrungnir's whetstone is lodged in his head. The weather erodes. Great slabs of basalt slide into the sea, as do homes along the eastern coast of England as the climate crisis deepens. But stone contends. Here, human beings make their homes between the earth and the sky, homes we change frequently and are encouraged to change frequently by estate agents and property developers. Habitation is not without its tensions, though, and I'm not just thinking of those who are forced to migrate, forced from their homes, nor am I thinking of those without homes, those in camps established throughout the world to detain and contain aliens, but also those who in our G7 countries sleep in doorways failed by our overworked social services and our housing shortages. All these people count, more than count. They make those of us with homes unsettled. We too might one day join the refugees. The paper or electronic deeds of sale notwithstanding, forest fires, lava flows, flooding rivers, tornadoes, earthquakes, and tsunamis render fragile our claims to ownership. Property is literally built upon presumption. As we lay out our decking and trim the edge of our lawns, we know this. Belonging is a perennial question, and belongings are the placebos we take as an attempt to keep the question at bay. The question makes us restless, even when we sit out in our armchairs before plasma screens. We're never as settled as we long to be, and we are driven. Human beings, like the lines of hominids from which we came, have always been driven. Analyses of DNA by anthropologists in genetics make it clear that Homo sapiens were nomadic and tribal and interbred. It is only in the last 11,000 years that they gradually settled into forms of urban and agrarian life. Prior to that, for millennia, even millions of years, Homos traveled and traipsed. Now, the idea or the ideal is that we dwell, belong, and are registered as dwelling and belonging. And for some, well, having one home is not enough. They must have another space to occupy, a second home, a holiday home, a trailer parked at a coastal resort by a wooded lake on a remote island, a trailer not parked at all, but able to travel from one spot to another. Spot is a good landmark term. It reminds me of a series of large photographs outside the Cape Town Planetarium. While waiting for the next showing, people can trace where they are through an arrow pointing to a spot. You are here on the map. To begin with, the map is of South Africa, then the Earth, then the solar system, then the Milky Way, then a system of neighboring galaxies and nebulae, until finally they stand before a map of the known or observable universe. The spot where we are becomes increasingly infinitesimal. In addition, the snapshot nature of photography cannot account for the expanding nature of the universe, where every star cluster is racing away from each other. Belonging, dwelling, settlement, and homemaking are precarious notions, though for some, wars, disease, colonialisms, and climate change turn restlessness and existential anxiety into humanitarian crises. The numbers who now live subsistently grow daily, and many who thought they would never belong to them are experiencing haphazard and hand-to-mouth existences. The space between earth and sky is unsettlingly vast. And as I said, apart from all the longing to belong, we are driven. Transgression is written into us. And by that word, I do not intend anything theological like sin. Between the years 1936 and 1937, Ansel Adams wrote 2 letters to 2 very different people living on different sides of the United States. But the parallelism in one phrase in each letter is significant for the powerful effect he is able to create in his photographs in Yosemite. The first is to a childhood friend and himself a photographer, Cedric Wright, in 1936. The letter describes a big thundercloud encroaching upon Half Dome and reflects upon the tragic and wonderful realities of earth and men and of all the interrelations of these. The phrase I'm picking out of this letter is about rock. He speaks of the clean reality of granite. The second letter was written a year later to one of the great early American photographers, Alfred Stieglitz, and describes his elation and excitement about what Stieglitz saw in his work and how Stieglitz's perspective and critical observations inspired the best in him. I see only one thing to do: keep the photography as clean, decisive, and honest as possible. There's not just that repetition of clean with respect to granite and photography that interests me. There's also that relation between reality and decisive, honest photography. This realism was defined back in 1932, when a group of photographers in San Francisco met, talked, viewed each other's work, and called themselves the F/64 group, after a diaphragm number of the photographic lens, as their manifesto explained to their first exhibition. The group sought to establish photography as an art based in the medium itself, rather than its more pictorial character that looks towards painting and the graphic arts. It signifies to a large extent the qualities of clearness and definition of the photographic image, the manifesto went on. And it aspired to pure photography or straight photography. But what my selection of the 2 phases from the 2 different letters brings to the fore is the interrelation of earth and humankind that generates, through the created and creative, new imaginative, emotional, and living forms. The relation between earth and men that would become earth and artist was recognized long before Ansel Adams decided he would not be a concert pianist, but a professional photographer. He may have been 14 when he first made his visit to the Yosemite Valley, but the flickers of that relation begin earlier in 1916 when he was ill, confined to bed, and given J.M. Hutchins' 1986 volume, In the Heart of the Sierras. A florid text that may be, with a grammatical error in the title because Sierra is already plural, as Adams noted. But for the impressionable, the imagination can feed on the slenderest of suggestions. On the South Pacific Rail trip down to the River Merced from San Francisco, he was already prepared for the epiphany to come. As he said years later when reflecting upon the making of one of his most iconic images, Moonrise over Hernando, 1941, chance favors the prepared mind. We finally emerged at the Valley View. The splendor of Yosemite burst upon us, and it was glorious. Little clouds were gathering in the sky above the granite cliffs, and the mists of Bridal Veil Fall shimmered in the sun. We trailed a drogue of dust as we gathered speed on the level valley floor. One wonder after another descended upon us. I recall not only the colossal, but the little things, the grasses and ferns, cool atriums of forest. The river was mostly quiet and greenish deep. Sentinel Fall and Yosemite Fall were booming in early summer flood, and many small, thinning, shining cascades threaded the cliffs. There was light everywhere. A new era began for me. Like so many people, I'm overawed by his black and white photographs of Yosemite. El Capitan, 1952. Monolith, the face of Half Dome, 1927. Bridal Veil Fall and Cathedral Rocks, 1942. Cathedral Rocks, 1949. Moon and Half Dome, 1960. And I could go on. One captivates me most because it attends to those little things and communicates Adams' understanding that although the colossal can grab attention and play to our theatrical sensibilities, presence lies in detail. And it is presence that Adams strains to capture, the actual communication of that relation between earth and men. There is an abundance of prints that demonstrate that attention. Cedar Trees, Winter, 1949. Sequoia Roots, 1950. Forest Floor, 1950. But for me, Merced River, Cliffs of Cathedral Rocks, 1939, gives astonishing expression to the tension between the colossal and the little. The horizon is absent from this image, just a dark corner of sky in the top left-hand corner. The cliffs are just cut off above the tree line, and they dominate the exposure, with the river snaking round and disappearing beneath them. The cliffs and the trees along its banks are reflected in the river. These features lend abstraction to the composition because its subject seems to escape or transcend the frame, while the image is a seething density of material tones, textures, and rhythms. Granite, leaves, bending branches, deep flowing water. The light plays on and enhances these textures, diagonals, curves, such that what is uppermost is a murmuration of fine and coarse grains, of stone, vegetation, water, and light. What is human and animal in this landscape is only the concealed cameraman feeding upon the plenty presented to him and answering its presence with his own. Here is that relation of earth and men, the meticulous care evident in the composition and patient camera work is his response. The photograph, his gift to what is being given. Here is the art form emerging from that relation. The artistry absorbs the natural scene, not in a predatory, consuming way, but rather in respect and abeyance. It meditates, it mediates in its own technical and crafted fashion. It mediates what is mediated to him through the granularity, the marvelous sense of substance. In 1932, he wrote, "No matter how sophisticated you may be, a large granite mountain cannot be denied. It speaks in silence to the very core of your being. It cannot be denied, but neither can it be embraced." There are times when Adam speaks of harmony or balance in that relationship between earth and men. But there's something confrontational in that harmony. And it is men he is speaking of. And that's why I've emphasized it by using his language. His photographs of granite and scarred sequoias are as permeated with a certain frontier masculinity as Hemingway's fiction. Everything in Merced River, cliffs of Cathedral Rocks is drawn into the confrontation between the cameraman and the cliff face. The lyrical ripples, reflections and curves of the water and the foliage soften the confrontation. But it is man in the face of granite that fixes the gaze. Each takes the measure of the other. But it doesn't have the even-handedness nor the heroics of the Will Kane and Frank Miller climax of High Noon. There is an indomitability about the cliff face, blocking all way forward that cannot be overcome. The mountain can be climbed, the summit reached, but Adam knows only the ego is flattered in this. The mountain is indifferent. Its real force and mystery aren't touched at all. Its sheer bulk might challenge the man, demand he acknowledge the limits of his strength, his ability, his ingenuity, that this is man pushing and exerting himself. And we have accounts of such struggles in Alex Honnold's first free solo climb of El Capitan, wonderfully filmed by Jimmy Chan and Elizabeth Kai-Vasali in 2018. But such pushing and exertion have nothing to do with any relation with the earth. And in this photograph, Adam doesn't give us the mountain. He gives us the sheer rock face, creviced and coarse-grained. The face will not flatter any man's ego. It will not act as a screen for human or male projections. The cliffs will rather pull the man up short and demand to know who or what he is. Neither will the cliffs be simply internalized to compose some monolith within the man's own psyche. Their presence before him refuses being reduced to some symbol of Adam's own masculinity. The photograph was taken only a year or so after a nervous breakdown. that put Adams into a sanatorium for weeks. There's been much speculation about the cause of this breakdown. Overwork, failing marriage, a woman's rejection of his advances, or his love for a woman. The details are unclear, and his official biography barely makes mention of it. But something about his masculinity was crushed. And when he came out of the sanatorium, he took his family to live directly in Yosemite. What the cliffs communicate is an age and an otherness, both an alienation and a summons, almost a judgment. Any relationship possible with the cliffs will not be on human terms. Their presence will haunt, the confrontation will haunt, and the haunting will ever be forgotten or evaded. The haunting will shape internally some response that will define itself within the man, his feelings, thoughts, behaviors, moods. But the cliffs will remain sealed within their utter singularity, marking a boundary to human comprehension. It is their inhumanity that speaks, almost turning the river that will change, and the play of light among the leaves of the trees that will also change when the trees lose their leaves, into an orchestration of the incidental and decorative. The picturesque that Adams so wanted to eschew, fighting against both the commercialization of fine art and national park tourism. The picturesque is the daily dilemma of human existence, imbricated in any number of impressions. We need to make meaning. We compose a patterning, and the picturesque is a consoling, if not profoundly self-reflective composition. But something beneath the picturesque communicates disturbing surfaces in disquieting ripple effects. Writing in 1958 to his friend Edward Land about the photography of the late Edward Weston, Adam judges Weston's pictures were reflections of his inner and spiritual drive. Drive is an important word here. The drive towards what form of belonging? The phrase might well stand as a judgment for his own best work. Adams may struggle to give expression to what he called prophecy in art, the mark of the authentic. He knows, as he wrote to his friend Ted Spencer in February 1948, that there are relatively few authentic creators of our time. He knows such artists possess a resonance with eternity, and he sees this resonance is something to fight for. He recognizes it takes tremendous energy and sacrifice. But there's something inhuman in such a fight and the sacrifices it requires. He could lose his soul by its being emptied of the picturesque. And what then will remain? A vision, perhaps? A prophecy, perhaps? But a vision of what? A prophecy about what? What is crafted within us? What relationship emerges when we enter? Adams possesses the wrong word. When we enter a resonance with eternity, we can say something about what an object is, but not what it's about. That's the point where the artistic creativity takes over. This is a mountain. That is a tree. We can go further. This is Cathedral Rocks. That is a pine tree. But identification goes little beyond labeling. The emotional and affective power of this mountain or that tree is a communication of some sort, a mediation of some sort, soul to soul, spirit to spirit. And that communication shapes the values we develop, the behaviors we manifest, the proclivities of our thinking, the nuances of our speech, the health or lack of it in our bodies. It shapes the ethics we live, beyond moral injunctions and social mores, the quality of attention we bring to the work we do, and the crafting of both our art and life. We are planetary, not urban beings. And to forget our planetary origins and end is to forget something about the kinds of beings we are. We are closely related to the land as to the living, the moon as to our family and our friends. The nakedness of stone is not revealed in sun. Sunlight exposes its texture, but not its life. That's revealed in rain, in cloud, in fog, in its relationship with water. Wind so strong the white streaks of waterfalls are blown back across its surface. Cloud around its summit deepening its dense and intense greys. Snow pocketed in its clefts. Where the light plays and what the stone presents is viscous and ever-changing. Let me step back now and reflect upon this relation to rock that here I've explored in the relation to the photography of Ansel Adams, though I might equally have done it through the work of the poet Robertson Jeffers. Let me reflect theologically. First, I want to be clear that while this exploration bears some resemblance to religious naturalism, I want to push that naturalism much further than champions like Ursula Goodenough and Loyal Rue. I am not, as they are, consecrating science, using Lisa Siderus's phrase and the title of her own critique of wonder, knowledge, and the natural world. Appeal is often made in their work to religious language like soul and spiritual, but it's nebulous to my mind. It's an easy spirituality of reception and delight, which are not bad responses in themselves, but spirituality is also about struggle, the deprivation of certainty, the naked walking along a cliff edge between faith in God and the abyss of meaninglessness. There are other naturalists, of course. Rachel Carson's trilogy on the sea is very much worth reading because she doesn't flinch from the predation that's out there and does not allow her lyrical prose to read phantasmagorial rainbows. She doesn't allow the abstractions, even idealisms of the natural to dominate. Neither do these reflections fit easily with some eco-theology, often prey to its own abstractions, even while listing details of the damage done to our environments. I recognize, though, in calling attention to our planetary nature and our dependence upon the elements shared with all that is non-human, that an eco-theology is latent, a latent etho-ethics based in tending and being attentive, and all that emerges from the formation of us as us through our elementary dependence. Ansel Adams was an early pioneer in conservation and the protection of an endangered environment. But to be also clear, I am not baptizing Adams' photography as some anonymous Christianity. He rejected any such identification with institutional Christianity. And I think that has to be respected. The same goes for the paintings of Turner and the Native American flute compositions of Carlos Nakai that I will treat in tomorrow's lecture. What I'm doing is attending to a formation, an aesthetic formation that emerges from encountering the elemental. It's a formation everything living participates in, human and non-human. And this formation is concurrent, but not identical with growing up, aging, and passing away. It bears witness to a creativity within us that propels us to communicate, not just passively receive. We are not only shaped by it, we are shaped by giving shape to it. It transcends us and is the source of our sense of transcendence. Calling it an horizon of being is too abstract. This is life, and life is visceral. We're back with the blood, mucus, sweat, muscular contractions and pain of the incarnation. There's an old question cited by Anselm, Cadeus homo? Why did God become man? It was given an important inflection by early feminist theologians. Can a male God save women? Why did God become male? We can push such questioning further. Why did God not come as a tree, or a bird, or a fish, or a frog? What I'm suggesting is that God did and does. Our creativity attests to our being created through Christ. That through has a maternal character related to giving birth. Our creativity attests to a longing to belong, because by being creative, we're sounding the depths of what drives our desires and the endless displacements as we clutch onto things that cannot bear the weight of what we are truly wanting. Creation is not alien to Christ. Christ dwells within that which is his own, ta idia, to quote John's Gospel. Everything is incarnate, and our lives, like all living things, are hidden with Christ in God. In God. Creative artists pursuing their visions of what is true and any beauty that adheres to what is true are sounding the depths of what is created, what is communicated in that which continually emerges from within creation. And I'll say more about that tomorrow when I introduce the term for all these shapings and fashionings, soul time. Thank you.